Hey guys, tonight we're gliding down the warm, whispering banks of the Nile. The reeds sway gently beside your modest little mud brick home, and the early morning haze clings to your tunic like a cat that doesn't want to leave. A faint clatter comes from the next courtyard over someone's grinding barley for breakfast. But you've just woken up, and your mouth feels like you've been chewing on a mummy's bandage all night. Dry, sandy, and oddly sweet. Yes, we're talking about dental hygiene in ancient Egypt, a civilization famous for pyramids, papyrus, and apparently powder made from crushed ox hooves to scrub your teeth. You probably won't survive this morning routine with your 21st century molars intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back on a woven reed mat, tucked into a dim little room that smells faintly of river silt and dried herbs. Sunlight is beginning to creep in through a gap in the doorframe, lighting up the swirling motes of dust in the air like tiny golden beetles. Outside, someone hums a tune older than empires. A woman down the street is already scrubbing her clay pot clean with sand. And someone else, probably your neighbor with the loud goats, is coughing and hacking, making you realize that yes, you've officially woken up in ancient Egypt. Welcome. Your mouth tastes complicated. There's a hint of date beer from last night, a ghost of garlicky lentils, and the ever-present tang of Nile dust. You stretch, yawn, and blink the sleep from your eyes. And now, like any sensible ancient Egyptian citizen, your day begins with teeth, or more precisely, dealing with your teeth before they deal with you. Because in this world where the desert meets divine bureaucracy, keeping your breath halfway decent isn't just a matter of comfort, it's tied to purity, health, and maybe even getting into the afterlife without the gods gagging. But first, let's set the scene. It's around 1400 BCE. You're living in Thebes, a city humming with temples, markets, and construction projects. Pharaoh Amenhotep III is lounging in his palace somewhere, probably getting his toenails gilded. But you've got chores. And one of them, believe it or not, is scraping the grime off your molars with powder made from animal bones. Dental hygiene isn't just a rich person's obsession here, it's a daily ritual for everyone from priests to pot sellers. In fact, the Egyptians were one of the first known civilizations to actively try to clean their teeth, which is kind of adorable considering they were also shoving eyeliner made of crushed lead near their eyeballs. And what they used, well, it was crunchy. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians cared about their teeth because of actual health concerns or because of ritual cleanliness, likely both. Purity was a big deal. You couldn't waltz into a temple reeking of fish breath and expect the gods to listen. So as you shuffle over to the low stone basin in the corner, you reach for your small pot of tooth powder. It smells faintly of mint, burnt shells, and something else. Something earthy and sharp. That would be the powdered ox hooves, charred, crushed, and mixed with myrrh resin or salt. You scoop a bit out with your finger. The texture chalky with the occasional tiny pebble that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. You brace yourself, wet your fingers, and scrub. It doesn't foam. It doesn't taste good. In fact, you kind of want to scream. But your gums feel cleaner already, and honestly, you're a little proud of yourself. There's something comforting about the methodical grind of it. Slow circles like you're sanding down the mistakes of yesterday's snacking. You spit into the sand and feel briefly almost modern. Almost. Nearby, your grandmother is using the same mix, except she swears by adding charcoal and frankincense to frighten away tooth demons. You don't question it. After all, she still has most of her teeth, and she's survived 3 husbands, 2 droughts, and a very spirited cobra. Out in the fields, workers carry their powder with them in tiny linen packets, rubbing it on their gums during breaks. Even temple priests, before reciting sacred texts, are known to do a quick cleanse to avoid offending the gods with sour breath. But let's be honest, it's not foolproof. By the time you reach adulthood, your teeth will probably be worn down from all the stone grit in your bread. You've heard stories of people losing molars while chewing. There's a rumor that one guy bit into a date and ended up spitting out a canine. Nobody's really shocked. Still, compared to other ancient civilizations, Egypt's approach is impressively proactive. They didn't wait for their mouths to rot before doing something about it. They started with ox hooves and then worked backward to herb salts and strange imports. You feel a breeze slide in through the doorway. The sounds of morning deepen, donkeys braying, merchants setting up their stalls, children laughing as they chase each other with lotus stems. Your mouth feels cleaner, if not minty fresh. You're ready to face the day with breath that only smells a little bit like bone powder and temple incense. And that's a win by ancient standards. You blink the last traces of sleep from your eyes and stretch your arms over your head, feeling the reed mat creak beneath your weight. The coolness of early morning is already fading, and the first real heat of the day is beginning to seep through the mud brick walls. Outside, someone's shouting about fish. Someone else is haggling over a jar of honey. But here inside your little home, it's just you, the sandy floor, and the unmistakable aftertaste of burnt hooves lingering in your mouth. Now that your teeth are technically clean, it's time to rinse. No minty mouthwash here, just a wooden cup filled with yesterday's boiled Nile water. You slosh it around with the enthusiasm of someone trying not to swallow whatever microscopic creature is still swimming in there. And there it is again, your morning breath. To be fair, your neighbors aren't doing much better. Morning breath in ancient Egypt is less of a personal failing and more of a universal fact, like the sun rises in the east or dates go bad fast. But as you shuffle to the open-air courtyard to greet the morning, you notice something odd. People do smell okay. Not great, but okay. And their breath. Not exactly roses, but it's not melting your eyebrows off either. Here's the thing about ancient Egyptian morning breath. It wasn't just something to suffer through. It was something people dealt with. They had routines, techniques, and occasionally desperate gambits involving powdered pebbles and palm wine. You pass by a market boy chewing what looks like a stick. It's not for snacking, it's his toothbrush. And that taste, probably a mix of salt and ash. The chew stick is a marvel of the ancient world. A thin frayed twig from the Salvadora persica tree, or whatever's locally available, pounded and softened at one end, so it fans out like a tiny brush. It's your next step in the battle against dragon mouth. You pick up your own chew stick, slightly damp from yesterday's rinse. You run your fingers over the frayed fibers. The texture's somewhere between a loofah and a very tiny broom. With a few firm swipes, you scrape it along your back molars, wincing a little as you hit a sensitive spot. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians used chew sticks systematically or only when something got particularly lodged in there, like a seed or a bad decision. What's clear is that these sticks were everywhere, and they weren't just chewing sticks. They were status objects. The higher-ups in society had fancy versions, some wrapped in linen, some soaked in fragrant oils, some even dipped in myrrh to ward off tooth rot, or according to temple gossip, romantic curses. You chew thoughtfully, listening to the rhythmic crunch of bark and grit. Your mouth feels less like a battlefield now, more like a slightly haunted hallway. But here's the kicker: most Egyptians didn't know about cavities in the way we do. They saw tooth pain as either divine punishment, demonic interference, or the result of wind in the teeth, which frankly sounds like a problem you'd have if you slept with your mouth open during a sandstorm. Your grandfather once claimed he could cure a toothache by whispering spells into a clay figurine shaped like a hippo. You believed him until he tried the same technique on your cousin's sprained ankle. Still, as you continue gnawing on your chew stick, You wonder how people got through life without toothpaste commercials, without braces, without dentists on TikTok. The truth, they made do. You spit into the dust. There's something satisfying about that dull, dusty splat. A little gross, sure, but satisfying. You watch as a neighbor, a potter with a laugh that could wake the dead, cleans her own teeth with a paste made from powdered limestone and vinegar. She swears it keeps her breath sweet and her curses sharper. You make a mental note to never cross her. Breath, after all, is power here. To speak clearly is to speak spells. The priests chant invocations with purified mouths. The dead are wrapped with scented resins to ensure they don't return with halitosis. Even love poems mention the sweetness of someone's lips, and not metaphorically. So your little morning ritual? It's not just hygiene, it's spiritual armor. Of course not. Everyone's routine is the same. The guy who bakes bread near the temple, he skips chew sticks and goes straight for rinses with date wine. Makes his morning prayers sound very enthusiastic. Others chew on juniper berries. Some crush peppermint with a mortar and pestle the size of a turtle. One guy even claims he uses imported Syrian resin, though his teeth look like a crumbling wall. Still, you can't deny it. There's something calming about this process. The deliberate motions, the ancient flavors, the strange comfort of knowing that even 3,000 years ago people woke up and thought, my mouth feels gross. I should fix that. And sure, crushed ox hooves might not sound soothing to you. But in this world where luxury is defined by how not gritty your tongue feels, it's downright indulgent. So you finish scraping. You rinse again with that cautious Nile water. You even rub a little myrrh oil on your gums because your cousin said it made her more kissable. You take a deep breath. It's not minty, but it's decent. And as you step outside into the buzzing morning haze, ready to face the gods, the goats, and maybe a few fishmongers, you can't help but smile. Even if that smile includes a tooth slightly worn down by bone dust. You step into the sun-drenched courtyard, where the breeze carries hints of roasted barley river silt and the unmistakable smell of donkey. The air is dry and warm, already curling around your skin like linen fresh from the fire. You tug your head wrap into place, shield your eyes, and begin your walk toward the herb seller's stall. Why? Because your chew stick has started to split. Your tooth powder is almost gone, and you've got a little soreness in your left incisor that's either from yesterday's gritty flatbread, or if your aunt is to be believed, bad luck from walking under a drying crocodile hide. You trudge along the dusty path, sandals slapping softly, passing mud-brick houses, painted with faded murals and tiny household shrines carved into their walls. Children dart between carts. A temple cat eyes you from a perch. You nod in respect. One should always be polite to a cat in Egypt. You never know which ones report directly to Bastet. As you walk, the little toothache pulses again, a dull throb that reminds you how central oral care is to your day-to-day existence. And you're not alone in this. In fact, Egypt had an entire profession dedicated to dental woes. That's right. Somewhere out there, likely in the richer quarters of the city, is a Sal Enbalo, an ancient Egyptian physician. And some of those physicians specialized in teeth, or at least claimed to. Historians still argue whether these so-called dentists were actual medical practitioners, or more like magical tooth whisperers. The surviving papyri suggest a bit of both. Some prescriptions are based on herbal mixtures. Others involve spitting incantations into a crocodile-shaped cup. You arrive at the herb seller's stall, shaded by date palm fronds and stacked with neatly labeled jars. The seller, a woman with sun-leathered skin and quick hands, greets you with a gap-toothed grin and holds up a small pot of powder. You recognize it, a mix of natron mint and crushed eggshell. Classic. Not exactly spa-level luxurious, but it gets the job done. She also has bundles of chew sticks tied with linen fresh cloves, and even a small packet of dried henna leaves for people who believe coloring your teeth protects them from decay. You make your purchases haggling politely, offering a handful of lentils in exchange. She throws in a pinch of anise to ward off stink spirits, and you thank her with a smile. As you walk back, you roll the chew stick between your fingers. It's smooth and cool, cut from a tamarisk tree, faintly fragrant. You can already feel the fibers loosening just from the heat of your hand. You think about the people who lived before you, how long before temples towered above the horizon. People likely crushed chalk and rubbed it on their gums with twigs. That continuity is strangely comforting. And then you remember you're due at the scribe's workshop, which means sitting hunched for hours over papyrus scrolls while dry ink cakes under your nails, and definitely no snacks allowed. So your mouth better be in decent shape. You take a moment to prep. Dip your chew stick in a bit of vinegar. Rub it in salt. Then gently bite down and begin to brush. And as you do, a nearby group of travelers passes by their camels, kicking up little clouds of dust. You overhear them talking, one's from Nubia, another from the Levant. They're arguing over which regional herb makes the best mouth rinse. The Nubian swears by crushed fig bark. The Levantine insists on a mix of olive oil and date vinegar. This debate has been going on for centuries. People from every corner of the ancient world brought their own ideas about cleanliness, scent, and ritual. And Egypt, being a hub of trade, absorbed them all. Historians still debate whether these exchanges actually improved Egyptian dental practices or just made the powders smell fancier. Either way, your molars are now coated in something that tastes vaguely like seawater and lemon, and still that little throb in your incisor persists. You sigh. Maybe it's time to try something more ceremonial. There's a shrine nearby, one dedicated to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing and destruction. You stop by, kneel before the offering platform, and leave a small wedge of bread and a whisper. May you strike down whatever thing is gnawing at my tooth. You're not sure if it works, but a passing breeze makes the incense smoke curl toward you like a nod. You take it as a good sign. Back on your feet, you glance around. Everyone here seems to be doing some version of this cleaning, chewing, praying, experimenting. A merchant with breath like fermented onion is sucking on cardamom pods. A priest wipes his mouth with a linen cloth before reciting a blessing. Even a little boy no older than 6 is mimicking his mother's brushing technique using a straw stalk and a smear of honey ash. It's all so human, so familiar. You realize with a strange sense of calm that thousands of years from now, people will still be standing in front of little reflective surfaces trying to fix their teeth. They'll still be fussing with powders and brushes, still debating fluoride versus charcoal, still wondering why their mouths always feel weird after sleeping. And maybe, just maybe, they'll look back and think, wow, crushed ox hooves. That's hardcore. You chuckle, or try to. The incisor reminds you it still exists. You press your tongue to it, wince, and decide to find that Sebudino W after all. If anyone knows how to fix this, it's probably the guy who once treated a toothache by stuffing a cooked mouse into someone's cheek. Desperate times, desperate rodents. You arrive at the SWNW's modest quarters, tucked between a pottery shop and what smells suspiciously like a papyrus fermentation pit. There's no official sign, just a faded carving of a tooth above the doorway, and a bundle of garlic hanging nearby to ward off bad spirits or maybe just mosquitoes. Hard to say which is worse. The doors open. You duck your head, step inside, and are immediately hit with a heady wall of smells, warm herbs, old sweat, and something faintly metallic like blood, or perhaps a very nervous copper coin. The SWNW himself is seated on a mat, gently poking at a goat's jawbone with what looks like a reed stylus. He looks up at you with the weary amusement of someone who has pulled more teeth than papyrus scrolls in his lifetime. Left incisor, he asks before you even say hello. You nod, a little unsettled at his precision. He gestures for you to sit on a stone block and begins his examination with all the ceremony of a man fixing a cracked bowl. He presses gently at your jaw, mutters something under his breath, possibly a prayer, possibly a complaint about goat bones, and then reaches for a pot of powder. This, he says, is from the temple apothecary. Ox hoof ash natron and just a pinch of dried pigeon droppings. You blink. He grins. For binding. Don't worry, it's sterilized. You're not sure what sterilized means in this context, but you nod politely as he begins to mix the powder with a bit of water and applies the resulting paste directly onto your gum with the blunt end of a carved ivory stick. It stings. Not a lot. Just enough to make you feel like your mouth is being politely punished. Now bite this, he says, handing you a bundle of linen soaked in something aromatic. Clove and date vinegar, maybe embalming fluid. You bite, you wait. He watches. The pain eases just a little. Not gone, but quieter, like it's sulking now. Historians still argue whether these ancient dental treatments were actually effective or just elaborate placebos wrapped in sacred linen. There's evidence that some procedures worked, especially the herbal ones. Others, like drilling teeth with bow drills or yanking them with bronze tongs, were less gentle. You're lucky, really. Yours isn't bad enough to need pulling, though he eyes it like a man who wouldn't mind trying just for the practice. You chew too hard, he mutters. Too much sand in your bread. Maybe stop gnawing on bones. You nod again, as if not chewing bones is some kind of radical new idea. But honestly, he's not wrong. Ancient Egyptian bread was often gritty with groundstone particles. That's what happens when you mill grain on sandstone slabs. Over time, it wears down the enamel, turns your molars into sad little nubs. The SWNW offers you a sachet of herbs and a prayer scroll you're supposed to keep under your head at night. For good dreams, he says. And tight gums. You don't ask how those two things are related. As you leave his workshop, the sun is at its highest, throwing crisp shadows across the street. You duck into a shaded alley and take a sip from your water flask, carefully trying not to disturb your newly treated incisor. You run your tongue over the area. It still tastes faintly like scorched pigeon. Back in the open, you head toward the riverbanks, where people are gathering for the midday rest. You pass a couple lounging beneath a sycamore fig tree, both using the shade to clean their teeth. One is threading a reed between her molars like dental floss. The other is humming a tune while rubbing resin on his gums with a finger wrapped in linen. You lie down nearby, letting the breeze from the river cool your face. Birds chirp, frogs croak somewhere out of sight, and the reeds sway with a soft rustle. You remember your grandmother's story, that in the afterlife, the gods judged you not only by your heart's weight, but by your mouth's truthfulness. That to speak clearly in the hall of Mayat, your mouth had to be clean spiritually and physically, which is why she said proper dental care was part of your soul's preparation. It sounds a little dramatic, but as you lie there with your herbs, your ointment, your slightly aching incisor, you start to believe her. The mouth is important, not just for food, for prayers, for names, for magic. And if a little ox hoof dust helps keep that mouth functioning, so be it. You close your eyes and listen to the distant hum of the marketplace. Someone's chanting, someone's laughing. Somewhere a dog barks and a pot shatters. Life continues, and so does the battle against mouth funk. You smile, careful not to press the sore tooth. You survived the SWNW, and your mouth for now is at peace. The late afternoon sun has mellowed to a coppery glow, casting long shadows over the temple walls and shimmering faintly off the Nile's slow current. You're walking now, not urgently, not hurriedly, just letting the stillness settle back into your bones. Your tooth no longer throbs, though it still reminds you it's there, like a neighbor who's stopped complaining, but still watches you through the window. You've heard whispers that the Temple of Thoth keeps more than scrolls and scribes. Rumors say their library contains rare papyri medical ones, filled with recipes and rituals not shared with common healers. And where there are recipes, there are inevitably more experiments in mouth care. So naturally you head that way. The temple courtyard is quiet, except for the soft steps of acolytes sweeping sand from the flagstones. A scribe notices you, and after a brief exchange and a small offering of honeyed beer, leads you to a chamber lined with clay jars and bundles of dried plants. He says this is the herbal womb, a nickname given by initiates. You're not sure whether it's charming or mildly unsettling. The air here is thick with the perfume of centuries. Myrrh, fenugreek, blue lotus. Teeth, the scribe asks, barely looking up from his sorting. You nod. He gestures toward a low table where a scroll is unfurled beside a dish of dried beetles and a pot of what looks like fermented onion jam. You try not to react. Here he says, pointing at a faded line of hieratic script. This one is from the Eber's papyrus. Mentions a compound of crushed ox hooves, powdered malachite, and sycamore sap for strong teeth. Also useful against, he squints, mouth demons. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Some terms haven't aged well. Historians still debate what mouth demons really referred to. Possibly bacteria, possibly ulcers, possibly just an excuse to rinse with expensive wine. The Eber's papyrus is one of the oldest medical documents we've found, over 100 pages of treatments for everything from bellyaches to toe fungus. And nestled among its wisdom are at least a dozen entries on oral care. Some are surprisingly modern. Others involve inserting bread soaked in beer behind the molars and chanting to Hathor. A few are just odd. You pick up another scroll. This one describes a treatment using ground barley black cumin, and you blink twice dried lizard tail. Supposed to numb the jaw and chase away pain. You ask the scribe if people actually tried this. Only the rich, he says, or the desperate. He hands you a small pot sealed with beeswax, ox hoof powder, from temple stores. We mix it with pomegranate rind and vinegar. Strengthens the enamel, or so they say. You roll the jar in your hands. It's warm from the room's heat. Outside you can hear the river again. Boats bobbing, oars slapping rhythmically. The call of birds heading to their roosts. You thank the scribe, leave another offering a carved bead from your necklace, and make your way back toward the residential quarter. Along the way, you spot an old woman seated on a woven mat, gently filing her teeth with what looks like a shark's tooth. She catches your eye and grins, 4 teeth missing, but the rest gleaming. She beckons you over. Without saying much, she pulls out a pouch of crushed herbs and dips her finger into it. She pats your cheek and mutters something about balance and not angering the gods of breath. Then as quickly as she appeared, she waves you away, back into the growing twilight. You continue walking, passing murals of people harvesting papyrus of gods, weighing hearts of musicians playing flutes at sunset feasts. You think about all the mouths in those paintings, smiling, laughing, singing. So many lives, so many teeth. And here you are still fussing over yours. It's oddly comforting, isn't it? That this strange obsession with our mouths, keeping them clean, sweet-smelling, pain-free, has existed since time began. You look down at your hands, still lightly dusted with ox hoof powder. You smell faintly of vinegar and ash, but your incisor doesn't hurt, and that right now feels like victory. You wake the next morning to the sound of reed flutes drifting through the window and the unmistakable clatter of someone dropping a jug outside. Your jaw feels tender, but the swelling has subsided, and for the first time in days, you're not starting your day by grumbling at your own reflection in a burnished bronze mirror. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and rummage through your satchel for the herbal sachet the W&W gave you. Still pungent, still slightly suspicious. But if you're going to embrace ancient Egyptian oral hygiene, it's time to do it like a local. That means going beyond temple prescriptions and into the daily rituals passed down through households, those time-tested routines that don't make it onto scrolls, but linger in kitchens and courtyards. Your neighbor, a matron with a voice like gravel and arms like tree trunks, is already sweeping her stoop. When she sees you sniffing the herb pouch like a curious cat, she waves you over. Come, she says, not unkindly. You need a chew stick. Ah, yes, the miswak of ancient Egypt twigs from certain trees, frayed at the ends and soaked in spices or palm wine. They clean the teeth, freshen the breath, and according to one old merchant, keep a man's tongue from shaming him. It's unclear whether that's literal or metaphorical. Possibly both. She hands you one slightly damp, smelling faintly of cinnamon and maybe basil, and demonstrates. You copy her motions, gently rubbing the twig along your gums. It's oddly satisfying. The texture massages rather than scrapes, and the fibers release a mild, astringent tingle. Historians still debate exactly which plants were used for these chew sticks. Some suggest arak or acacia. Others claim sycamore fig was the favorite. Either way, the practice was so widespread, it shows up in tomb paintings often tucked behind ears or laid reverently alongside the dead. A clean mouth, it seems, was as important for meeting the gods as it was for gossiping in the market. You spend a few minutes chewing and polishing. Your neighbor nods approvingly and points to a clay bowl on her windowsill. Anise and caraway, she says, for breath. Also good for warding off ill-wishers. You pop a few seeds in your mouth and let them dissolve slowly. A licorice-like sweetness fills your nose and throat. You feel fresh, almost smug. There's a lull in the morning bustle as the sun climbs. You wander through the residential alleyways watching others engage in similar routines. A man uses his thumbnail to scrape tartar from his canine. Two children squabble over who gets the last fennel root. Even a cat paws curiously at a stick soaked in peppermint oil. Probably not for him, but you admire the effort. In a shaded courtyard, you pause by a group of women grinding herbs on basalt slabs. They're making a mouth rinse, they explain. Mint, pomegranate, peel, powdered barley. Fermented together for 7 days. It bites like a cobra, one says cheerfully. But your tongue will shine. They offer you a sip from a ladle. You hesitate. Then, like any brave historian of hygiene, you sip. It does bite. Your eyes water slightly, but your mouth feels instantly awakened, like it's been doing push-ups. You thank them, bowing slightly, and one of the women laughs. Come back next week, she says. We're trying beetroot and tamarind. Evening returns quicker than you expect. You find yourself back in your own quarters, watching the last light slip across the mud brick walls. You boil a bit of date syrup and vinegar, swishing it between your cheeks, the way your grandmother used to. No pigeons or ox hooves this time, just a homemade brew with a comforting sweetness. Before bed, you pull out the chew stick once more. It's frayed now, soft at the tip, and slightly pink where your gums gave way just a little too eagerly. But it feels right. Ritualistic. Your mouth hums with a clean heat. Not minty like toothpaste, but herbal, earthy, alive. You lie back, listening to the night insects buzz and chirp through the open window. A neighbor coughs, a dog howls distantly, and a child sings half of a lullaby before trailing off into sleep. You think again about all those people from centuries ago, chewing twigs, grinding spices, praying to Thoth for sturdy molars. How strange and comforting that in a world of crocodile gods and golden tombs, someone still woke up every morning thinking, ugh, my breath. And tomorrow you'll rise and do it all again. Because good teeth, like good sandals, are too important to neglect. The next morning, you rise with a groggy jaw and a half-frayed chew stick still clutched in one hand. You don't even remember falling asleep. That's how deeply the pomegranate rinse knocked you out. You blink at the sun filtering through the linen curtain stretch with a creak of tired joints and reach automatically for the herb pouch. Funny how fast these things become habit. But today you want answers, not just remedies. So you set off toward the House of Life, a kind of proto-university nestled behind the temple precincts, where scribes and priests store knowledge the way bees store honey. Here scrolls lie bundled like sleeping serpents guarded by men with ink-stained fingers and the posture of those who've been bent over desks too long. If anyone can tell you why ground ox hooves work on teeth or whether they actually do, it's these folks. You're ushered into a chamber thick with the scent of dried papyrus and palm oil. The scribe who greets you is older than most sandstone statues. His robe is threadbare, his voice barely louder than a whisper, but when he speaks of enamel calculus and the divine symmetry of human molars, he lights up like an oil lamp. He gestures to a worn scroll, unfurling it carefully. This, he says, is from the papyrus of Kahun. Mentions hoof powder. But it's not just ground bone, it's heat-treated first. Calcined. You nod as if that word doesn't make your brain itch. He explains burning hooves changes their chemical structure, turns collagen-rich horn into a brittle mineral-dense substance not unlike modern calcium phosphate, the stuff in enamel itself. You're not just brushing, he says. You're reinforcing. And suddenly, it makes a certain kind of sense. The Egyptians perhaps accidentally had stumbled upon something like remineralization. You're tempted to ask about fluoride next, but the scribe is already rummaging for another scroll. Historians still argue whether these preparations were based on trial and error divine inspiration, or just a weird love of burning things and seeing what sticks. The answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. He hands you a second scroll. This one is more poetic than practical, a hymn to Heka, the god of magic and medicine, invoking the cleansing of the mouth, so the soul might speak clearly in the afterlife. A clean mouth is not just health, the scribe mutters. It is order. It is truth. Mat. It's funny you think how dental hygiene could be both science and ritual, both remedy and philosophy. To them, bad breath wasn't just unpleasant, it was a kind of moral failing. If you couldn't speak sweetly, how could you speak truth? The scribe points you to a side table where several prescriptions have been recreated by apprentice medics. You pick one up, a hardened cake made of fig ash carob resin and burned ostrich eggshell. To be chewed before argument, the note reads, "You're not sure if it's to protect the teeth or to win the debate." Another sample is a lozenge shaped like a small obelisk. This one smells of cedar and vinegar. You're told it was meant to be placed beneath the tongue during funerals, so the dead might envy your breath. You roll it around thoughtfully. There's something both oddly charming and vaguely competitive about the idea of being judged by a corpse for your halitosis. Before you leave, the scribe gives you a small clay amulet, a stylized open mouth etched with tiny hieroglyphs. Protection, he says, against tooth rot and ill-spoken curses. You thank him with another offering, a dried fig, and step back out into the sun. The Nile sparkles in the distance. A breeze carries hints of incense and roasted grain. You tuck the amulet into your belt pouch. On the walk back, you stop by a vendor selling soapstone figurines and medicinal powders. He has a pyramid-shaped grinder for spices, and next to it a jar labeled elephantine dust. He claims it's made from pulverized ivory and crocodile bone used by queens to clean their molars. You don't buy it, either the story or the dust, but you do admire the packaging. Back home, you sit cross-legged on your mat, lay out your various discoveries, chew sticks, hoof powder, fennel seeds, the fig ash cake, and realize something. You're not just surviving this dental dilemma, you're thriving in it. You're part scribe, part chemist, part adventurer. And your teeth have never been cleaner. You're starting to feel almost smug. Not modern toothpaste smug, maybe, but smug enough that when a neighbor with breath like boiled onions leans in too close at the market, you instinctively take a half step back and clutch your herb pouch like a status symbol. Yes, you think. You've joined the ranks of the dentally enlightened. But there's still one mystery nagging at you like a bit of flaxseed between your molars. How exactly did Egyptians deal with toothaches? You've tasted the chews, sipped the rinses, even rubbed ground hoof against your aching gums. But what if the pain went deeper into the very pulp of your tooth? What if it kept you awake at night, aching like a cursed mummy's elbow? You seek answers from a traveling healer, one of those semi-legitimate types, who straddle the line between wisdom and complete guesswork. He set up shop beneath a fig tree just outside the northern gate, offering everything from goat fat ointments to potions promising relief from all body noises. You're not sure what that last one means, and you don't ask. To your surprise, when you bring up tooth pain, he grows serious. "You want the wasp remedy?" he asks. You raise an eyebrow. "No," you say politely. "I don't want any remedy with wasps." But he insists this one's ancient. An old priest's scroll describes roasting a wasp's nest over coals, grinding it into powder, and mixing it with date syrup and crushed beans. "Pack it against the sore tooth," he says. "It will sting before it soothes." You decline the wasp, but buy a jar of his clove oil instead. The label reads, "For pain and for lovers who must whisper sweetly." That's more your style. Back in town, you head to the granary, where an old woman is known for her spice cures and sharp tongue. She takes one look at your swollen cheek and grunts. Too many figs. Not enough respect for the gods. You sit as she mixes something in a stone bowl, dried myrrh, frankincense, a pinch of sea salt, and yes, crushed hoof. She adds a few drops of vinegar and instructs you to swish spit and swear a vow to stop grinding your teeth during arguments. The taste is bracing like gargling a desert storm. But after a few minutes, something magical happens. The throbbing in your molar dulls to a manageable murmur. You sit on her steps, head tilted back, watching ibises wheel overhead. Historians still argue whether these ancient pain remedies actually worked or simply numbed the mind through distraction. Some speculate placebo, others point to real antibacterial properties in the ingredients. Frankincense, after all, contains boswellic acid, a natural anti-inflammatory, and salt water that's been rinsing wounds since before wounds had names. You return home with a pouch full of clove pods and a small scroll fragment the old woman let you borrow. It's barely legible but appears to list dream rituals for healing toothaches. One line reads, "Sleep facing east, mouth closed, heart open." That's either deep or deeply impractical. You'll try it anyway. That night, with your head resting on a rolled linen cushion, you run your tongue over your teeth. They're still imperfect, still a little sore. But somehow they feel like yours again, not like invaders waging war against your peace of mind. You whisper a thank you to Heka, god of medicine. Also maybe a quiet warning to your future self: avoid dried figs before bed. And skip anything involving wasps. Always. You drift into sleep with your jaw loose, your breath sweetened, and your dreams flavored faintly with hoof dust and myrrh. Morning sunlight filters softly through the linen curtains as you awaken, jaw still a bit tender, but your spirits lifted. You stretch your fingers and reach for your chew stick, worn now but trusty like an old friend. You marvel at how these simple rituals, once foreign curiosities, have woven themselves into your daily rhythm. It's strange to think that just days ago the idea of cleaning teeth with crushed ox hooves felt odd, even a bit grotesque. Now it seems almost poetic. Today, you decide to explore the social side of dental care. How did ancient Egyptians show off their sparkling smiles? After all, cleanliness isn't just a matter of health. It's about status, identity, and even flirtation. You wander toward the bustling marketplace where traders from far-flung lands hawk spices, fabrics, and jewelry in a cacophony of tongues. A well-dressed woman with elaborately braided hair catches your eye. Her smile is radiant teeth white as lotus petals. You overhear a merchant praising her tooth powder made from finely ground limestone and scented with frankincense and myrrh. The woman casually brushes some powder along her gums, explaining it's a secret passed down through generations. You're invited to join a small gathering nearby, where men and women discuss beauty regimens while sipping date wine. They share tips, rinsing with diluted natron to brighten teeth, chewing licorice root to freshen breath, and using tiny mirrors made of polished obsidian to inspect their smiles. Mirrors, such a luxury, the idea of seeing your own teeth flaws and all must have been a radical intimacy. Interestingly, some attendees confess to using crocodile dung as sunscreen, a fact that causes you to smile wryly. Remember that story. It seems personal care and curious concoctions often went hand in hand. Historians still argue whether these beauty rituals were widespread or mostly confined to the elite. The evidence is patchy, but one thing is clear: a clean mouth was a prized feature, a social asset that transcended class. As you stroll away, you pass children playing with small animal bones, pretending they are toothpicks. Their laughter bubbles over the hum of the market, reminding you that oral care was a lifelong journey from curious beginnings to confident smiles. Later, you pause by the Nile's edge, dipping your fingers into the cool water. You think about the layers of time beneath your feet and how each generation left behind small, often overlooked marks of their daily lives, like crushed hooves in a tooth powder. You brush your teeth gently with your chew stick, feeling connected to those who came before you. Tomorrow, you'll dig even deeper into these fascinating practices. The sun rises slower today, casting a golden haze over the Nile as you prepare for your next venture, uncovering the story behind ancient Egyptian dental tools beyond just crushed hooves and chew sticks. It turns out that the humble chew stick wasn't alone in the quest for oral freshness. There was a whole toolkit of devices, some practical, some surprisingly inventive. You find yourself wandering toward the workshop of a craftsman, famed for carving objects out of wood, bone, and stone. His hands are gnarled but steady, and his shop smells faintly of cedar and resin. He shows you a collection of artifacts resembling early toothbrushes, small wooden sticks with frayed ends, sometimes tipped with abrasive minerals to scrub plaque. He mentions toothpicks too often fashioned from sharpened twigs or reeds used not just to clean between teeth, but also as symbols of refinement at banquets and social gatherings. You picture an Egyptian dining hall, guests delicately picking remnants of roasted duck from their teeth while recounting tales of Nile adventures. The craftsman points to a curious item, a small flat blade carved from bronze, likely used for scraping the tongue or removing stubborn tartar. You hold it carefully, marveling at the craftsmanship, and wonder how often it was passed around in communal use. In this era, personal hygiene was entwined with ritual purity, so these tools weren't merely for comfort, but also for spiritual cleanliness. You recall the priest's strict regimen of washing before ceremonies, and how oral care might fit into that broader picture. Historians still argue whether these implements were accessible to everyone, or mostly reserved for the elite and temple functionaries. The archaeological record is fragmented. Tools are found mostly in tombs of nobles or within temples, hinting at a class divide. You ask about abrasives. The craftsman smiles knowingly and shares a secret. Egyptians sometimes mixed powdered ox hooves with fine sand-ground quartz or even pulverized eggshell to create varying textures for cleaning teeth. It was a delicate balance, too abrasive, and you'd wear down your enamel. Too soft, and the teeth remained grimy. He hands you a small pouch of a gritty mixture, part hoof powder, part quartz dust. You try it gingerly, feeling the grainy texture on your tongue. Not unpleasant, just strange, like cleaning your teeth with the sands of the desert itself. As you leave the workshop, you reflect on the intimate relationship these ancient people had with their tools, each carefully crafted object telling a story of health status and daily ritual. You tuck the pouch into your belt, already imagining using it tonight under the gentle flicker of an oil lamp. The Nile's gentle current seems to lull everything into a slower pace, just as your thoughts settle into the idea of how much more there is to oral hygiene than just the basics. Today, you're curious about the role animals played in dental care. No, not as pets, but as unlikely contributors to the ancient Egyptian teeth-cleaning toolkit. You recall seeing ancient paintings depicting various animals with exaggerated teeth, crocodiles with grins full of jagged molars, hippos bearing massive tusks, and even monkeys showing off their incisors. But did these creatures influence human dental care in any way? The answer is surprisingly yes, and not just metaphorically. You visit a small village by the riverbank, where an elderly woman known for her herbal knowledge tells you about beeswax chews. The story goes that honeybees were highly valued not only for their honey and wax, but also for their tiny claws and mandibles. Locals believed that mixing crushed wasp nests and bee parts with hoof powder created a mild abrasive that helped scrub teeth clean without damaging enamel. You grimace at the thought of wasp nests again, but listen carefully as she recounts an old tale. Apparently, young boys used to mimic bee movements during festivals, pretending to sting plaque away from their teeth, a playful ritual blending nature and hygiene. More intriguingly, you learn that oxen themselves might have had a more direct role. Ancient farmers noticed that oxen occasionally rubbed their teeth against coarse stones, and even chewed on rough tree bark behaviors that likely inspired humans to experiment with similar abrasive materials for dental cleaning. Historians still argue whether these observations truly influenced Egyptian dental practices, or if it's a case of retrospective reasoning from modern scholars trying to connect the dots. Nevertheless, the link between animal behavior and human innovation is undeniable. As you sit beneath a tamarisk tree watching a cow lazily munch on reed stalks, you muse on the ingenuity of early humans. They weren't just passively accepting their environment, they were learning, adapting, borrowing from nature's toolkit to solve everyday problems. You try a small handful of crushed bee wax mixed with hoof powder. The texture is sticky and gritty, oddly pleasant, in a way that reminds you of the delicate balance between medicine and magic in Egyptian culture. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the sand. You smile to yourself. Who knew dental care could be so buzzing with life? As twilight settles over the desert, you find yourself pondering the deeper spiritual dimensions of dental care in ancient Egypt. After all, cleanliness was never just physical. It was tied to ideas of purity, the soul's journey, and cosmic order known as Ma'at. Teeth, you realize, were more than tools for chewing. They were symbols, gateways to health and harmony. You recall a tale of a scribe who wrote of a tooth-cleaning ritual performed before important ceremonies. Participants would wash their mouths with a special concoction made of crushed ox hooves, lotus petals, and natron water while reciting prayers to Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. The idea was to cleanse not just the body, but the mind, preparing oneself to receive divine knowledge. In a quiet temple courtyard, you meet a young priest who explains that oral hygiene was linked to the concept of clean speech. To speak truth and wisdom, one needed a pure mouth free of corruption or decay. It makes sense, you think, since words flowed from the mouth carrying power and intention. You listen as he describes how the priests used burnt ox hooves as incense, the smoke believed to purify the air and the spirits of those present. It's fascinating how a substance so earthly doubled as both a practical dental ingredient and a sacred element. Historians still argue whether these rituals were common practice or reserved for the religious elite. The evidence is scant, but the symbolism is clear. Dental care was woven into the fabric of spirituality and daily life. You spend the evening watching stars emerge over the horizon, imagining the ancient Egyptians brushing their teeth beneath the same celestial canopy, their thoughts aligned with the cosmos. Your jaw feels tender but calm, and you carry with you the sense that every small act, like crushing ox hooves for powder, is part of a larger story connecting you across millennia. The next morning, you find yourself intrigued by the economic side of dental care. How something as humble as crushed ox hooves could actually be part of a larger trade network. You wander through a busy bazaar filled with exotic good spices and raw materials, all destined for different corners of the ancient world. A merchant wrapped in vibrant linen gestures proudly to his wares jars of finely ground hoof powder, mixed with fragrant resins and herbs. Made by the best craftsmen near Memphis, he boasts perfect for keeping your teeth clean and your breath fresh for the pharaoh's court. You negotiate a small sample, curious about the economics behind this. How much did it cost? Who collected the hooves? Were there specialists or did everyone pitch in? You discover that ox hooves weren't just byproducts discarded in the fields, they were valuable commodities. Specialized workers collected dried and crushed them into powder, sometimes blending them with imported minerals like malachite or natron to enhance cleaning. This powder was then packaged in small containers made of pottery or alabaster, sometimes adorned with inscriptions or blessings. The whole process involved a surprisingly complex supply chain, from farmers to artisans to merchants. Historians still argue whether this was a luxury item for the wealthy or widely used across classes. Some evidence suggests that while common folk used simpler mixtures, the elite enjoyed elaborately scented powders that doubled as perfumes. You sip sweetened wine and listen to a trader from Nubia explain how these powders traveled south, mixing with local ingredients to create unique blends. The idea that crushed ox hooves from the Nile Delta might influence dental hygiene as far away as Kush feels both surprising and poetic. You tuck the jar safely into your bag, imagining the countless hands that touched this substance, each adding their own touch story and intention. Later, as you stroll back through the warm afternoon light, you catch the faint scent of crushed herbs and hoof dust on your fingers. It's a sensory thread, pulling you deeper into an ancient world, reminding you that even the smallest, most mundane details have rich histories worth exploring. The golden hour settles softly over the land as you begin to explore the curious intersection of medicine and dentistry in ancient Egypt. You learn that oral health wasn't treated as a separate concern, but integrated into broader medical practices, an approach as holistic as the Nile's own flow. Visiting a physician's chamber, you notice scrolls depicting remedies for toothaches, inflamed gums, and even cracked teeth. Remedies often combined crushed ox hooves with herbs like myrrh, cinnamon, and frankincense, not just to clean teeth, but to soothe pain and prevent infection. The sticky resins served as natural antiseptics, working alongside the abrasive hoof powder to maintain oral hygiene. You're intrigued by a peculiar treatment involving a paste made of crushed ox hooves mixed with honey and ground minerals applied directly to aching gums. Patients believed this not only alleviated discomfort, but also invited protective spirits to guard the mouth. The line between medicine and magic seems delightfully blurred. You watch as the physician carefully applies a small amount of this mixture to a patient's teeth, using a reed stick, demonstrating the care and precision involved. This wasn't a casual scrub, but a ritual steeped in knowledge, skill, and faith. Historians still argue whether these treatments were empirically effective or mostly placebo-enhanced by ritual. However, the practical antibacterial properties of ingredients like honey and myrrh suggest the ancient Egyptians might have stumbled on surprisingly effective remedies. You smile at the thought that crushed ox hooves, usually seen as waste, found new life, as an ingredient in healing, a testament to human resourcefulness. As dusk deepens, you feel the soothing weight of history settle around you, an intimate reminder that the quest for a healthy smile spans centuries, cultures, and countless curious minds. You reach for your chew stick, once more grateful for the chance to touch this ancient knowledge, however lightly, before night fully descends. Night falls gently, the desert cooling as you settle into the quiet rhythm of the evening. You reflect on the journey you've taken, tracing the story of ancient Egyptians and their ingenious dental care, from crushed ox hooves and fragrant powders to rituals linking body, spirit, and society. You remember the chew sticks fraying between your fingers, the gritty texture of hoof powder mixed with fragrant herbs, the whispered prayers to Thoth, and the bustling bazaars where these simple yet precious ingredients traveled far and wide. It's humbling to think that such a seemingly mundane act, cleaning teeth, carried layers of meaning, practical knowledge, and cultural significance. As you lie back, you envision the ancients performing their routines beneath the same stars, their smiles shining through the passage of time, connecting you to their world. It's a comforting thought that in the quiet moments of self-care, we are part of a long, unbroken human story. Historians still argue whether these practices were universal or elite, spiritual, or strictly hygienic. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, a blend of necessity, belief, and ingenuity. Tonight, as your own jaw relaxes, you carry with you the echo of those ancient whispers, the gentle scrape of hoof powder, and the timeless desire for cleanliness and comfort. Let your breath slow, soft, and even as the day fades away and your mind drifts gently down the Nile's calm currents. Imagine the warm glow of oil lamps flickering against sandstone walls, the faint scent of myrrh and lotus petals lingering in the air. The steady rhythm of water flowing, the distant croak of a frog, and the whisper of wind through papyrus reeds cradle your thoughts. There's a serene beauty in these small rituals. Each brush and scrape a tender act of care, linking you across centuries to faces long gone but never forgotten. Feel your body soften, your muscles releasing the day's weight as the ancient world settles quietly alongside you. Let your thoughts wander unhurried and peaceful as the gentle hum of history rocks you toward sleep. And know that in this shared moment, time folds softly, bringing you rest and a sense of connection that is as old as the river itself. Now close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift into a calm, restorative sleep. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.